All right, so Andrew Barry has been the point of a lot of the excess, I think, frustration from the coaching staff, from fans. And what I wanted to do today was to look at his body of work over the last 3 years, and determine, like, what kind of a job has he done? What kind of job does it look like he's doing? So we're going to look at least 2 years of drafts, right? Because I think you can get a good idea after a draft has elapsed and then another year has elapsed. This year, like, we can talk about some of the draft. It's not going to be the most impressive because, again, they only started with third round picks. And we're talking about rookie years from guys who are third round picks. So it's going to be what it's going to be. And then we'll talk about re-signings that he's made, people he's let walk over the course of the years, and then people he has brought on to the team, and see, has this been a net positive? All right, so we'll start first with the draft. Now, the main thing I want people to understand with the draft is how we talk about the draft. Some people talk about the draft as if, like, let's put a player, for example, who hasn't done much. And let's go with a whole different draft class so nobody gets in their feelings. Like, let's say somebody like Antonio Callaway, who was a fourth round pick, who everybody hyped up, right? We'll say something like Antonio Callaway was a massive bust. He was a fourth round pick that did not pan out. You know who else was a fourth round pick that did not pan out? Howard Wilson. You know who else was a fourth round pick that did not pan out? Ricardo Lewis. You know who else was a fourth round? Ibrahim Campbell. You know who else was a fourth round pick that didn't plan out? Pierre Desser. I just went through 7 years of fourth round picks, and all of those dudes did not end up being superstar players. So it is not normal for a fourth round pick to be a superstar player. And they did a survey of this in 2014, right? Of what round of the draft each players were selected in that started in the NFL. And they found that 30% of starters in the NFL were first round picks. In the second round, 17.5. Third round, 12.6. Fourth round, 10.8. Fifth round, 6.4. And then it gets to 4.9 for sixth round. And then seventh round, 4.2. And then undrafted, because if you're in the league as an undrafted player, you're probably a starter, 13.6. So does that mean that we should stop drafting players after the second round and just do undrafted free agents? No, right? We can't run that literally with that model. But what it does mean is that you can't have the same expectations for a fourth round pick that you would for a second round pick. That is kind of ridiculous, right? But anyways, is it nice when a fourth round pick becomes a starter? Yes. Should it be expected? Probably not. All right, so let's start with the 2020 draft. In the 2020 draft, the Browns drafted Jed Wills, Grant Delpit, Jordan Elliott, Jacob Phillips, Harrison Bryant, Nick Harris, and Donovan Peoples-Jones. I believe every player in the 2020 draft is still on the Cleveland Browns, which is good. That's very good. And I would say outside of Jacob Phillips, every player is kind of deserving of their roster spot. Well, I wouldn't say kind of, absolutely deserving. Jordan Elliott, not great, but he's still like an NFL player. Grant Delpit's been pretty good. Jed Wills has been a starter. Harrison Bryant, he's been a bit of a disappointment, and that's only given because he raised the expectations in his training camp, not because of where he's selected. Nick Harris and then Donovan Peoples-Jones has been very good. So that's pretty solid there. I would say Jed Wills, that's a double. He's a starter, but he's not anything more than that. You kind of want him to be more than that, but he's just what he is. He's a starter, right? You picked him with a 10th pick overall. Could he be better? Have there been better 10th picks in the NFL? Yes. Have there been worse? Yes. So he's a double. Grant Delpit right now is a single, really coming into his own, had a lot of interceptions this year. 5, I think, career. I think he had like 3 back-to-back or something crazy like that. We'll see how he parlays this year, the ending of this year into next year, if he builds on that, he will be close to another double to a triple. If not, then he's going to stay at a single because he has been a consistent starter for a very long time for this team. Jordan Elliott, I would say Jordan Elliott is closer to a miss than anything. I think there's some potential for him to become a role player, but he's closer to a miss at this point. Jacob Phillips I think he is a miss at this point. Again, misses in the third round aren't something that really count against you. You miss in the second and first, absolutely, that goes against you. But if you miss in the third round, it's not that big of a deal. It's not great either. Harrison Bryant, I think he's a role player, so that's a single. Nick Harris, he was supposed to be the starter, and if he beat out Ethan Posick, and Ethan Posick was as good as he was, then I would assume Nick Harris is good. I'm going to go incomplete here. This is a foul ball. Like, I can't really. How am I supposed to grade Nick Harris at this point? And then Donovan Peoples-Jones, he is a consistent starter, a pretty good player, and since that's a 6th-round pick, you have to, add on to that, okay, that's about as good as you can go with the 6th-round pick that's not Tom Brady. That's a triple right there. So you got a double with Jed, a triple with DPJ, a single with Delpit, and then everybody else is either misses or kind of a role player or something like that, right? So 2020 draft, it's a pretty decent draft, especially if you compare it to some of the other drafts in Browns history. And that's not a good bar to measure against. But, I mean, if you compare it to other drafts in the NFL that year, that's pretty good. All right, 2021, Greg Newsome, really good starter. I see some people trying to act like Greg Newsome's not good. Stop that. That's just blatantly not true. Think what Tony Grossi was saying, that Greg Newsome's not good. That's ridiculous. That is just blatantly making something up to try to prove a point because you don't like the current administration. That is not based in reality at all. JOK, who's been pretty decent. Anthony Schwartz, we can all agree, is a miss. James Hudson, haven't really seen much from him. Tommy Togiai, we can all agree, is a miss. Again, 3rd round and 4th round misses aren't the same as 1st and 2nd round misses, but they're still misses. Tony Fields, kind of an incomplete on. Richard LeCount, he's a 5th-round pick. He's kind of panned out the 5th-round pick standards, which is a guy that's not on the team anymore. And then Demetric Felton, who's still on the team, a 6th-round pick, had some flashes here and there. And honestly, that's more than you would expect from a 6th-round pick. Normally, 6th-round picks are guys you pretty easily forget about, right? If I want to read off some 6th-round picks from Browns history before, you would see that. Right, Scooby Wright was a 7th. Randall Telfer, remember him? Caleb Brantley, Damian Ratley, Drew Forbes. These aren't guys who became great players. So that's about what a 6th-round pick is. And Demetric Felton is more than that. Right? He's had some moments. He's at least scored some touchdowns for this team. So if I go through this with Greg Newsome, that's definitely a good pick. JOK, that's a good pick. Anthony Schwartz, that's a miss. I thought Anthony Schwartz was a bad pick at the time. I have not been proven wrong on that. But I thought it was a bad pick at the time. I thought there were better players you can get out there. James Hudson, I think he's going to be fine. Tommy Togiai, that was a miss, but it's a 4th-round pick outside the top 100. You just kind of get what you get at that point. Tony Fields, okay. Richard LeCount, it's a miss at a 5th-round pick, but that's kind of you get what you get at the 5th round. And then Demetric Felton is better than what you can expect for a 6th-round pick, but it's not like he's an impact player on the team. So it's not like you got DPJ again, right? And then this year, with no 1st or 2nd-round picks, you got Martin Emerson, who I think is a home run for a 3rd-round pick. I think he's probably going to end up being a Pro Bowl player at some point, same as Greg Newsome. And then you got Alex Wright, who's a role player, David Bell, who's looking real role player-y. Perion Winfrey, who was ironically 1st-team NFL All-Rookie. I'm just going to point that out. He was 1st-team NFL All-Rookie. I'm just saying. I know. No sacks with 1st team. It was a bad class, is what I'm saying. But yeah, Perion Winfrey was there. I mean, I don't think he was first team NFL All Rookie by like any credible institution too. Let me point that out there too. But yeah, Perion Winfrey had a bad year. Cade York bad. Jerome Ford, we'll see with him. Michael Woods, haven't seen enough. Isaiah Thomas, pretty good for a 7th round pick. Again, there's a lot of picks here, but remember, all of these picks are after the 1st and 2nd round. That's their choice, though. They did trade out of the 2nd round. They could have had a chance at George Pickens. They could have had a chance at a number of other guys, but they decided to keep trading back, and they ended up with Travis Hunter could have been somebody they could have went after, who I think would have had some kind of impact on this team. Instead, they traded back and got Perion Winfrey and Cade York. And I like Perion Winfrey. Cade York, not so much. But you do have to wonder, was that necessarily worth it? I don't know. Like, that's the one thing, the one move in the draft. Like, if I had to say, if any move in the draft out of all 3 years, the only move that I would say was questionable, like truly a questionable, criticizing move that you can throw at Andrew Berry for this, even at the time it happened, is trading out that 2nd round. Other than that, the drafts have been fine to above average, if not good, to be honest with you. To get a starting player in year 1 in a draft where you don't have a 1st or 2nd round pick is pretty good. To get what they got, two starters in 2021, that's pretty good. And they got 1, 2, maybe 3. Well, they got 3, maybe 4 starters in 2020. So Jed Wills, Grant Delpit, DPJ. Those are 3 guys who started pretty early in their career. Nick Harris, who might have started this year. That's 3 and a possible. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. And not just when I say starter, guys who started for this team, because we could add Tommy Togiai to it. I'm talking about legitimate NFL quality, good starters. So that's pretty good. The drafts have been good. I know some people want to make it seem like the drafts have been terrible. The drafts for Andrew Berry have been fine. Let's look at some of the free agent stuff. 2020 offseason, they lost Joe. Remember when they lost Joe Schobert? That was like the biggest deal in the world. The Browns don't have Joe Schobert anymore to replace him with BJ Goodson. BJ Goodson ended up being fine. And they added Conklin, Wills. They kind of fixed the offensive line. That ended up being a really good offseason for this team. They went 11-5 the next year. So really no complaints about that offseason. That's exactly what you wanted, right? We were worried about the offseason. Hey, is Andrew Berry going to fix the offensive line? We just got rid of John Dorsey. He came in, fixed the offensive line. Browns actually had one of the best offensive lines in football that year, and then rolled on. In 2021, they added Malik Jackson, John Johnson, Malik McDowell, and lost Larry Ogunjobi. If there's been one consistent. Oh, they also lost Sheldon Richardson, I think, in 2020. But if there's been one consistent complaint, right? So I'm going to add another thing to a consistent complaint. First complaint, legitimate complaint about Andrew Berry trading out the 2nd round. I think that's the only one you can really pull out the draft that's fair. Free agency, I would say the lack of attention to defensive tackles and losing starters and not replacing them, right? So you came into the job with Sheldon Richardson and Larry Ogunjobi, who weren't great, but were 2 starters, like NFL level starters at defensive tackle, and the defensive line was fine. You lost Sheldon Richardson, never really replaced him with anything permanent. Then you lost Larry Ogunjobi and never really replaced him with anything permanent. Larry Ogunjobi still an NFL starting defensive tackle. Not a great one, but still like a starting defensive tackle. And now, you're left with one of the worst defensive tackle rooms in the NFL. That's a problem that you did not have coming in, and that's a problem that you do have coming out, right? So defensive tackle, that's something that, hey, if he does not, he has to fix this offseason. We'll see how he does. Now, the question is, was this more of a result of Andrew Berry not wanting defensive tackles on the roster or not prioritizing them, or more of a result of both Joe Woods and Andrew Berry not wanting to prioritize the position? If one of them in that combo did, they would have prioritized that position, but it seems like both of them did not really prioritize the position, which is why they let it kind of go to crap. So because I think if somebody was banging the table for defensive tackles, you would have had more attention to that position. But neither Andrew Berry nor Joe Woods really cared, and it shows in what happened over their tenure here. Now, if somebody does come in, bangs the table for a defensive tackle, we have to see, is Andrew Berry going to be stubborn about that? Or is he going to be flexible about it and say, okay, yeah, we'll get more defensive tackles, we'll spend more? This is the offseason to find out, because every single defensive coordinator they're talking about bringing really does care about that position much more than Joe Woods did. So there is that, right? That's another legitimate complaint, right? Defensive tackle. I would also add in what John Johnson was a lackluster signing. And this is on both Andrew Berry and the defensive staff. John Johnson should not have been brought in to play the position that he ended up playing in this defense. I think that was a waste of money. And they did that in 2021. It just never ended up working. Now, to Andrew Berry's credit about the defensive tackle thing, did bring in Malik Jackson, Malik McDowell, which kind of worked for a little while, but again, duct tape solutions. I'm not a fan of those. John Johnson, I would say, was a miss. We can throw in guys here too, like Hooper, legitimate miss. And then in 2022, they let Hooper go. They let Awalk. Well, no, they didn't let. They let Baker go, Troy Hill, and Jarvis. I don't think after this season we're complaining about any of those misses, unless you're one of those like Jarvis changed the culture people, which this team stunk with Jarvis on it last year. I don't know why we think they would have been magically better because Jarvis would have been here. He just made a speech on Hard Knocks. It really wasn't that much of a culture change. Like, I like Jarvis a lot, but the way y'all talk about him is like he had the magic let's fix the locker room fix on the team because he said something once on Hard Knocks. Like, the brother was a part of a terrible team in 2019. He was a part of another terrible team in 2021. In both of those seasons, he was part of the reason we were talking about the locker room being dysfunctional, because either he and his homeboy were saying, come get me, or he and his homeboy were trying to get out of town. All right, but either way, all the Jarvis myths included, I don't think there's a bad let go there. I would say Troy Hill is probably the one you can look at and say, why did we do that? They traded Troy Hill to move Greg Newsome to the slot. That's a joint. Like, why did Joe Woods and Andrew Berry think that's a good idea, right? Why did Joe Woods feel like, hey, moving Greg Newsome, that's just as good as anything to play the slot? I think that was a stupid idea from the start. And why did Andrew Berry believe in it enough to trade Troy Hill? I don't know. That's joint stupidity there. But you did bring back Awalk, which was good. You signed Jacoby Brissett, which I feel like was really good. Cooper trade, really good. If we go back to 2021, what was good in 2021? Oh, yeah, Malik McDowell, Malik Jackson, I thought that was good. Clowney was really good in 2021, so that was a good signing for that year. And Clowney was still decent this year. He just, was a grumpy old man behind the scenes, which is kind of what he's always been. And he did a really good job on the offensive line. So legitimate gripes, you could say, hey, the John Johnson signing wasn't good. The Austin Hooper signing wasn't good. Didn't do a great job with defensive tackle. Trading Troy Hill. But the good things that you could do, you could say, and I'm not even going to include like trading for Watson, because I do think that's a good thing, but that's just going to require far too much debate. And honestly, that thing's going to be what really determines his tenure. So if Watson is great for the next 3 years, then Ain't nobody gonna say shit about Andrew Berry no more. If he's not, then Andrew Berry probably ain't gonna be here no more. But that's gonna be what it is. That's gonna be what determines this whole thing. And since we only have 6 games of information, I can't just say clear win Deshaun Watson this way, because it's not about whether Deshaun's better than Baker Mayfield. That was kind of a given. The question with Deshaun Watson is he gonna be good enough to take you where you want to be? Because when you spend $230 million on the quarterback, that's kind of what he has to be. So that's what we have to see. And I haven't had a fair opportunity to judge that yet. So we'll see what happens on the whole Watson thing. But legitimate gripes again: defensive tackle John Johnson, Austin Hooper, Troy Hill trade. But things you can add to a plus as far as free agent acquisitions. Cooper, very good there. Brissett, very good signing there. Anthony Walker, bringing him back, very good signing. Clowney in 2021, very good signing. You can make the argument in 2022 it was a good signing because he did play well. 75 Pro Football Focus grade in 2022. I think he was like an 80 in 2021. 2 very good years of edge play from Clowney at not that much money. Malik McDowell, Malik Jackson, kind of duct tape solutions. That's in the category. In 2020, getting Jack Conklin, which was a good deal, and then drafting Wills and all that and fixing the offensive line. So there's a lot of good there. There's some bad. He also extended Myles Garrett, which is a good thing. Conklin, which is a good we'll see with Conklin. Teller, which is a good thing. Denzel Ward, we'll see, but I think it's going to be a good thing. I think he played this year pretty much injured. Joe Batonio, which is a good thing. David Njoku, which is a good thing. And Chubb, which is a good thing. So overall, there's really not, if you look at the total, right? 3 years of pretty good drafts. 3 years of pretty good drafts. Some really good off seasons where things got marketably improved. And then the roster's been fine, some good free agent signings. And then you have a couple of bad free agent signings, a position that did not get emphasized. And then trading out the second round are the only real things that I'm like, hey, he didn't do that good in these. With all of that being said, going over all of the phases of him being a GM, I think Andrew Berry is actually a good GM. I think you can look at his body of work and say, nah, it's pretty good. And is the record what you want? No, the record is not what you want. But is that Andrew Berry's fault? I don't think he gets a significant slice of that pie, right? I think we can look at where some things went wrong. Andrew Berry did not necessarily help those things, and he definitely made some mistakes down the line, but mistakes don't make you a failure. Mistakes just make you a person. And I think he hasn't made enough mistakes for me to be like, hey, he's on the hot seat. I think, honestly, Kevin's done more to deserve being on the hot seat than Andrew Berry, point blank, period. And then ultimately, what we have to remember is that Deshaun Watson, much like Zach Taylor in Cincinnati and Joe Burrow, is going to decide the fate of these guys. Because if Deshaun lives up to that contract or even gets close to it, right? If Deshaun is a top 10 quarterback in the NFL for the next 4 years, we're going to be all right. We're not going to be moaning and complaining about the coach, or we'll still be complaining because people love to complain here. But we're not going to be firing anybody anytime soon if he plays that level. If he does not, people are going to get blamed for that. People are going to get fired. Right? Because Deshaun has a guaranteed contract. We know one thing is for a fact: Deshaun's not going anywhere for the next 4 or 5 years. So if he doesn't perform, it's going to be pointed at either Andrew Berry for not supporting him with enough talent, or Kevin Stefanski for not putting him in the right positions to succeed, or both. Right? That is what's going to happen. We'll see. We will see. We will see what happens with these guys going forward. But I think if you look at the body of work, I think Andrew Berry's been a pretty good GM. And I think a lot of people who are calling for his job, I think that's a little bit misguided. But that's my thoughts on the GM position. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night.